Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have a Game Week 10 wildcard draft because this is a very popular Week 2 wildcard if you've not yet used the chip. But even if you have used the chip, today's video should still be useful because we're going to look at the best team and players from Game Week 10 onwards which may help you with your transfers. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, or maybe if you are new to the channel, please do consider subscribing. Make sure to drop a like as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, we're going to jump straight into the Game Week 10 wildcard draft, but I do just want to make a comment on my team value. It's not fantastic, but it is pretty decent. And from seeing some other drafts that people are building, I do think I have slightly better team value than the average person, especially if you've not yet wildcarded, because you may have missed some of the players that have recently risen in price. So there are two things to note around team value. Often, it's just as simple as making one downgrade and you can probably afford a similar team. So just as a bit of a spoiler, I have Jared Bowen in here. Going from Jared Bowen to Gordon, whilst that is a downgrade, may allow you to keep the rest of the squad in a very, very similar manner. So that is the first thing, is that yes, team value is important. And yes, it is one of the reasons why moving early and jumping on bandwagons can be useful. But it doesn't mean that you have to build a terrible team all of a sudden. It may just be that you have to sacrifice one player that you do slightly want. However, I would suggest that Haaland versus no Haaland, because I think it's viable and also potentially not viable. I think it largely does depend on team value. And the reason that I say that, I have Erling Haaland in this draft, which we're going to discuss. In my current team, I don't. I really don't think you need to sacrifice or lose Erling Haaland if you have good team value, because you can get pretty much every single player you would want in FPL, and you only have to sacrifice one while still getting Erling Haaland if you've got good team value. But if your team value is like 101 million or less, and you're struggling to get a lot of the players that I've got in this team whilst maintaining Haaland, I would suggest that if your team value is in that state, it may well be that Haaland out makes the rest of your team much, much stronger. So I know that seems like a crazy thing to say, that the players you should and shouldn't own is based on your team value, but I do genuinely think that's the case, that if you've got team value similar to mine, I don't think you have to lose Erling Haaland on a wildcard 10 draft. But we're going to discuss all of that. As you can see, currently lining up in a 3-5-2, and this team is rated at 100% according to Fantasy Football Hub, so it's nice to get a bit of a backing from the AI. And sadly, the defense is a little bit sort of template. If you've seen many wildcard drafts at the moment, it is normally along these lines. So I've got Areola and Strakosha. Now, the reason for that is I've got 0 in the bank. So even going for someone like a Turner would cause me to be in like negative balance. And to be honest, most weeks you're not going to want to play Turner anyway, and we think Areola is perfectly fine. I will just say, West Ham are the 4th worst defence, or the 5th worst defence in the league this season for expected goals conceded. So they have not been a good defence. And whilst Areola is cheap, he doesn't make that many saves, and I think there are some other decent goalkeepers. So if you've got the funds to go for a Johnston or a Raya or someone along those lines, it may well be worth it, and you may gain on those around you if you do so. Maybe even like an Emi Martinez or just a keeper like that. But to be honest, we want so many of the other outfield players that spending very, very cheap on the goalkeepers does kind of feel like it's worth it at the moment. But there are other places you could look. But for now, I've gone mega cheap, Areola and Strakosha. The defense, like I said, it seems to be very template at the moment. At least 3 of them, which is Cash, Tsimikas and Gabriel. All 3 of them have excellent fixtures. All 3 of them have attacking threat. Matty Cash's next 3 fixtures are ridiculous. He has the best expected goals in the league for defenders. There's very little to dislike about him. I do think he's worth the extra money on top of the likes of Pau Torres and Luke Dean. So Matty Cash would absolutely be in all of my drafts. Tsimikas is a bit of a risk. He was rested tonight. I'm recording this after the European game for Liverpool. So he was rested, rotated, whatever you want to call it. I think he is their first choice left back. And I think in pretty much every Premier League game, I would expect him to start. And listen, if he gets the odd early sub every now and again, as long as he's getting to 60 minutes, that's not necessarily an issue. But we did see with Udogie, whilst this was probably due to a knock or muscle tightness, Udogie coming off on the 55th minute is an example of if defenders do get early subs, it doesn't always work out. So we'll have to assess how that goes over the coming weeks. But Tsimikas feels like a bit of a gift at around 4.5 million, that he's going to be on some set pieces, great delivery, arguably an even better delivery than Robertson, and playing in a decent enough Liverpool defence, around sort of 8th or 9th for expected goals conceded, with great fixtures coming up. So Tsimikas feels like a gift. And I've gone for Gabriel because I do think you want to cover the Arsenal defence, and he's the cheapest option there. And previously, historically, Gabriel's had excellent goal threat too. So there's very little to dislike about Gabriel. other than the fact that at the moment, it looks like Zinchenko might not quite be first choice. Tomiyasu's playing in that position. So I think for now we are safe, especially with Partey injured. But once Partey's not injured, if Zinchenko is still not completely favoured and he's rotated slightly, and maybe like Tomiyasu's performances drop off slightly, it may be in a position, I suppose, in the future where Gabriel starts to miss out again. But he's done very little wrong since coming back in. He was in their first team last year. I think Gabriel's spot is fairly safe for now. So I think that back three with Areola in goal, it's template for a reason on Wildcard 10 because it's very, very cheap. You're covering three pretty good defences plus Areola, and it just looks really, really nice with the fixtures coming up. On the bench, I have Taylor as a 3.9 because I don't think you have to go overly expensive with that fifth defender. And I think at least he is playing every minute available for Burnley. And there are some weeks, this week included, where you could potentially play Taylor if you wanted to. But he's more than often just going to sit the second or third sub for you. And I do have Harry Maguire. The reason for Harry Maguire is, again, I've got no money in the bank, and at the moment, he does serve as a decent fourth defender with really good fixtures in 11, 12, and 13. And specifically in Game Week 11, as an example, Gabriel has Newcastle. Maguire has a really decent fixture in Game Week 11. Would you want to play him? I think is it Everton away or it's Fulham or Luton? It's one of those three fixtures there. And again, the same in 12 and the same in 13. You could absolutely get away with playing him, and it does look like at the moment he is going to be the one to partner Varane in that defence. Yes, Lindelof could start the odd game, but Maguire has been playing really well. And he does carry a little bit of goal threat when he does play too. But you're not going to want to rely on Maguire long term. He isn't a player that's going to break the game for you. But as a fourth defender, if you are short on budget, I don't really mind him. It would be nice to try and get like a Dan Burn or a Gahey in here as your fourth defender instead, especially with Tsimikas being a bit of a rotation risk. But I just want loads of the attackers. And you'll see in a second, my attack is absolutely stacked. And as a result, it's very, very difficult to get any more defenders in. So that's the back line. Regardless of your budget and team value, I think that's a really solid start. I will comment now on Kieran Trippier. Ridiculously good FPL option. I, in my team, own Kieran Trippier because I sacrificed Haaland. But if you want all of the big hitters in there, one or two of the other big hitters has to be sacrificed. Whether that be Watkins or Bowen or Trippier or Son or Salah or Haaland, you have to choose the players that you are most happy to not own. And I just think with the fixtures coming up for Newcastle, clean sheets will be a little bit less likely, and so will attacking returns. That is not to say that Kieran Trippier won't keep clean sheets, won't get bonus points, and won't get attacking returns. I just expect it to drop off to the point where he may still be just about value at 7 million, but I don't expect him to continue at like 10 plus points every single week on average. So Kieran Trippier is unfortunately the one I've had to sacrifice. Not that I think he's a bad option, but when you look at my front seven, you're going to understand why. So here we go. This is why, in my opinion, it is worth sacrificing Trippier, because look at this midfield, and the front line is great as well, but the midfield in particular is just perfection. I would say that this is the best midfield that you can get on Wildcard. And of course, this is where it's going to be tricky if you don't have good team value. You're either going to have to lose one of these players or lose one of your forwards, potentially Erling Haaland. And this is where the decision does become important. If you have similar team value to me or better, which a lot of people do have better, this is the midfield I would be going for. It has absolutely everything that you could want. I think that the three essential players for me on a wildcard, along with Ollie Watkins, is Salah, Son and Saka. I would not be sacrificing any of these three players in a million years. Salah and Son in particular are absolutely critical for me. We've spoken about Salah in enough detail, and I don't think anyone would build a wildcard draft at the moment without him because it just doesn't make sense with his performances and with the fixtures that Liverpool have coming up. I reckon over the next 6 or 7 weeks, you'll captain Salah at least 3 or 4 times. So Salah's absolutely essential for me on a wildcard. Son is the one that I'm seeing a lot of people sacrifice. And listen, it makes sense because the fixtures for Son aren't great coming up. He is very, very expensive. And if you want Salah and Haaland, you also want a Watkins, you also want a Trippier. When you get into that point, you're thinking, maybe I want a Saka or a Martinelli in there too. Then Son has to be the one that makes way. So for me, I've chosen Son instead of Trippier, is essentially the decision in this wildcard draft for me. And the reason for Son is just so many reasons. Ange Postecoglou is making this Spurs team play at a ridiculous level. And he actually commented this week that he's really disappointed with the attacking threat that they're showing. He's very happy with how they've looked defensively, but he thinks they can continue to improve and develop from an attacking sense, which is ridiculous with how well they're already attacking. They're top of the league. He has Maddison providing for him. And when you could look at his data since he moved to the number 9 role, he's on a 0.91 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90, which is up there alongside Haaland and Darwin. On top of that, he could potentially have penalties as well. And on top of that, further, he is in my opinion, the best finisher in world football. And when you look at the stats, it kind of backs that up alongside the likes of Lionel Messi. He's a better finisher than Haaland. His conversion rate is unbelievable. So, I mean, he is a gift in FPL. Regardless of the fixtures, I would argue Son may well be the best player to own in FPL at the moment. And there's just not a chance that I would drop him from a wildcard team. But I know that creates a difficult decision elsewhere because it may be that you have to drop one or two other big hitters to accommodate. I think it's worth it. You will see, though, that I've dropped Maddison, and I've dropped Maddison for Saka, because I think in a straight shootout, when we're not taking into account transfers because of Korsha on a wildcard, for me, Saka is a slightly better asset than Maddison, purely due to the fixtures, and also the fact that at least we know Saka is on some penalties. Maddison could also be on some penalties, but we know with Saka that he is, and Saka's also significantly better at home. When I look at the next three fixtures, Sheffield United, Newcastle, Burnley, two of those are at home against the two worst defences in the league in Sheffield United and Burnley. So for me, Saka would be absolutely essential once again on a wildcard. So along with Watkins, we'll discuss in a second, Salah, Son, Saka, non-negotiable, which left two spots for me. And because my team value is good, and because I've gone super cheap on the bench with Tricocosha, Maguire, Taylor, and Archer. And by the way, you could downgrade Taylor to you could downgrade Archer to Osula or Mabama to gain an extra 0.2, but I've gone so cheap on the bench because I wanted to get in two other really good midfielders. And I've managed to squeeze in Matoma and Bowen. Again, if you don't have the value for this, these are the spots where you might have to downgrade slightly. But there are tons of great options, so it's not necessarily an issue. But the reason for these two is they're both very talismanic for their teams. They're both involved in a high percentage of their team's goals. Bowen, in particular, is involved in pretty much all of West Ham's goals. He's got extremely good goal threat as well. Wherever he plays across that front line, he's got very, very good goal threat. His creativity is pretty low, but we want our players scoring goals, so it's not a massive issue for me. Yes, he's not on penalties anymore, but I don't think that's a massive issue. I look at him and I think he's got a lot of route to points. I think he's playing well, passing the eye test, and I think with West Ham's fixtures that they have coming up, they are going to score goals, and as a result, you would assume that Bowen has to be involved in them. So I think Bowen is worth it, and Bowen is up there alongside some of the other players as being one of the more essential picks on a wildcard if you can afford him. That being said, that is a spot where you might have to downgrade. Now, if you do have to, tons of good options. In particular, there is one player that I really like, and maybe you could double up with Matoma or go for a Diaby and this player instead, and that is Adingra. I think with March and Welbeck's injuries, Adingra at 5 million will start most games. Yes, he may miss the odd one, but realistically, alongside Bruno Notte and maybe Ansu Fati, Adingra is the only real right-sided player that Brighton have. So for 5 million, saving, what is that, 2.3, 2.4 on Bowen, Adingra could be an excellent option. So that is the spot where if your team value is really, really pants, but you still want to go for Erling Haaland and all of these other big hitters, then Bowen to Adingra, sorted. I still feel like Adingra could even outscore Bowen. Matoma, though, I still think he's worth the extra money on top of Adingra, just because he's got pedigree in the Premier League. And also, I do think he is slightly more nailed. I mean, Matoma's minutes have been definitely going under the radar this season. He's played 90 minutes, I think, in every single game apart from two. One, he started from the bench and got a brace off the bench at halftime. And the other one, I think he came off around 80 minutes because Brighton were winning comfortably. So Matoma is about as nailed as you can get in that Brighton attack. And the fixtures that Brighton have coming up over the short term, the next four in particular, but also the long term, sort of post game week 20, Matoma could be kept for conceivably as long as like 12 to 15 game weeks. So I just feel like this midfield just has everything. Great fixtures this week, 4 of them at home against pretty poor defences in Sheffield United, Fulham, and Everton and Forest are kind of okay defences, middling defences, but really nice fixtures this week. Really good fixtures over the short and long term. On top of that, all of these 5 players are very talismanic for their teams. And what I mean by that is when their teams score, you expect all 5 of these to be involved. So I would argue this is the best midfield that you can build on Wildcard at the moment. I absolutely love it. If I were to make a downgrade, it would be Adingra. Yes, you could try and squeeze Diaby in here due to the fixtures that they have, but I've just not been overly impressed with Diaby. Cole Palmer is another decent option if you don't fancy a punt on Adingra. But yeah, Adingra is probably the one I would point out as maybe a cheeky punt if you need a cheap option in the midfield. Let's look at the 2 forwards now. So just to finish up, you probably could have pieced it together anyway, but we do have Erling Haaland and Ollie Watkins. Again, if you just, maybe you skip the first section and you've just skipped to the end to see the team, don't do that, by the way. Watch the entire video. But I think the only reason you drop Erling Haaland at the moment is if you have poor team value, and maybe if you were trying to build a team with Haaland, you have to lose Son, you have to lose Bowen, You maybe have to downgrade Saka to Martinelli. Like, let's say you've got really poor team value, or maybe you are just someone that likes to build a strong bench. These are kind of the only reasons that I would really drop Haaland, because the data across the season is still there. He still is getting chances to score, and City aren't just going to continue to be an average side, because at the moment they're 8th for expected goals. I expect Manchester United and Bournemouth to be 2 really good fixtures for them, and I would expect them to start to improve. And I would want Haaland on a wildcard 10. I think you've got not lucky across the last few to not get returns for him, but you've got to take the risk and also be successful with it. And also, Salah captain has outscored him in those weeks. So there's been a lot that has gone non-Haaland drafts way. Now, I'm less convinced that you need it unless, like I said, you have to sacrifice lots of parts of your teams to get him in. So for me, with my team value in this position right now, I would have Haaland in there. That to say, though, Alvarez is still returning at a really good rate for half the price. His data isn't anywhere close. In the last 3 weeks, it is. But across the season, Haaland has significantly better data than Alvarez. And you don't really feel probably fully comfortable captaining Alvarez. So Haaland offers a real good captaincy option, specifically in Gameweek 11 against Bournemouth. And I do think he is a significantly better option than Alvarez. But at the moment, Alvarez is performing to a decent standard. So I don't think it's a terrible downgrade to save you 7 million. And as you can see, the issue with this team is I do have to lose Alvarez, who I think is an excellent pick at the moment. But I just think that Haaland and Watkins are just slightly better. I would put Alvarez as probably the 3rd best forward to own at the moment. Watkins is a no-brainer, probably the 4th most important asset to own at the moment. Like, if I were to rank them, which I did in yesterday's video, Salah, Son, Watkins, Saka. I would rank them in that order, and then 5th would be Haaland, then maybe 6th would be Trippier/Bowen, and then you've got to make the choice there. Of course, you could play a 4-4-2, by the way, and drop Bowen, but back to Watkins, what else do you want at the moment? Right, yes, his data is okay/average at 0.6 expected goal involvement, but this is a man on fire. He scored once again in Europe tonight. He is finishing absolutely everything. And then there are 2 other things that are really going for Villa and Watkins at the moment. They are ridiculously good at home. They've got Luton at home this week. And also, they are just putting teams to the sword and scoring tons of goals. And I like Watkins for that reason. His minutes are very, very good as well. And there are some really decent home fixtures coming up beyond the Luton game too. The next 3 fixtures for Ollie Watkins are perfection. After that, they do start to get a little bit more tricky. And you will have a decision at that point of, do you want to sell Watkins? And I may well sell Watkins to get back to Haaland, but you'll have that decision yourself. Maybe you move him on to another player. But I just don't see as you can build a Gameweek 10 wildcard draft now and not have the best player in the Premier League. Or at least for output, the best player in the Premier League. So for me, like I said, if you're ranking in order of which wildcard assets are really important at the more expensive price, Salah is the one. I would put Son in 2nd, but I understand the fixtures aren't quite there. Then Watkins, then Saka. If after squeezing those for him and the other players you want, you can still get Haaland, I would then get him. If you're struggling, maybe drop Haaland, go for Trippier, go for Bowen, strengthen that bench a little bit, and maybe even have some money in the bank. But I don't think you need a strong bench with this team. Who's a rotation risk? Matoma may miss some minutes, but he's always going to come off the bench. And then Tsimikas and Gabriel. Gabriel, yes, if Gabriel gets dropped, then you probably need to sell him because he might not come off the bench. But Tsimikas will probably come off the bench if he's benched. So I look at this starting 11, at least 8 or 9 are absolutely nailed. And the ones that are slight rotation risk, I don't think it's a massive issue. And I think they come off the bench if they are benched. So I don't see a major issue with this team that would make me think that you need to go much stronger than Maguire, Taylor and Archer. I love the wildcard draft. Let me know what you think of it down below in the comments. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 10 wildcard draft. Do let me know what you think of it down below in the comments, especially if you're on a wildcard yourself. Let me know how it differs from your current draft. If you did enjoy today's video, please do smash a like. Make sure to subscribe as well. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.